All right, welcome to chapter 7. Just like everything else, I'm going to read parts of this for you, and I'm going to leave parts of this for you to read on your own. So let's go and start. Talked about we've talked about Hester. We've talked about her skill with the needle. We talked about kind of what's going on with Chillingsworth. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about what's going on with the governor and the leadership in town. All right, so this is called the Governor's Hall. So there we go. Hester Prynne went one day to the mansion of Governor Bellingham with a pair of gloves which she had fringed and embroidered to his order. If you remember from chapter 5, Hester's skill with the needle is in demand from some of the more wealthy members of society, and which were to be worn on some great occasion of state. For, though the chances of popular election had caused this former ruler to descend a step or two from the highest ranks, he still held an honorable and influential place among the colonial magistracy. How's that for a word? So magistracy is probably a word we need to look up. So if you look here, you can see that a magistrate is somebody who administers the law. So the magistracy is several people who administer the law. All right. Another and far more important reason than the delivery of the pair of embroidered gloves impelled Hester. So she has a deeper reason, right, at this time to seek an interview with the personage of so much power and activity in the affairs of the settlement. So she wants to talk to this gentleman. It had reached her ears that there was a design on the part of some leading inhabitants cherishing the more rigid order of principles of religion of government to deprive her of her child. Okay, so this is key. She's taken the gloves, but what's the real reason, right? If you look at this question over to the right, it's because she's heard that some people want to deprive her of her child. On the supposition that Pearl, so if we look down here, supposition, right, and assumption. Okay, so on the supposition that Pearl, as already hinted, was of demon origin. Remember, we got that in chapter 6. These good people not unreasonably argued that that a Christian interest in a mother's soul required them to remove such a stumbling block from her path. If the child, on the other hand, were really capable of moral and religious growth and possessed the elements of ultimate salvation, then surely would enjoy the fairer aspect of these advantages by being transferred to a wiser and better guardian than Hester Prynne. So they're looking at it from both ways. They're saying, look, if the child's a devil, right, then they need to remove it from Hester Prynne's influence so that Hester can have spiritual growth. Or if the child is not the devil and can actually be morally good, then there's probably somebody better than Hester Prynne who can raise the child, according to their arguments. Among those who promoted the design, Governor Bellingham was said to be one of the most busy. It may appear singular and indeed not a little ludicrous, that's crazy, right, that the affair of this kind, which in later days would have been referred to no higher jurisdiction than that of a selectman. So we go down here, selectmen are officials who manage town affairs, right? That an affair of this kind, which in later days would have been referred to no higher jurisdiction than the selectmen of the town, would have been a question publicly discussed, on which statesmen of eminence took sides. At that epoch, that's just time. A pristine simplicity, however, pristine means beautiful or untarnished, right? Down here you can see pure uncorrupted. Matters of even slighter public interest, sorry, it's moving around on me a little bit, and thus of far less intrinsic weight, this means internal weight, than the welfare of Hester and her child, were strangely mixed up with the deliberations of legislators and acts of the states. The period was hardly, if at all, earlier than that of our story, when the dispute concerning the right of property in a pig not only caused a fierce and bitter contest in the legislative body of the colony, but resulted in an important modification of the framework itself in the legislature. So what this is saying here, that this is an early government, right? So early that there's a story where a dispute on a pig actually made changes, something that would be relatively simple in an established government actually changed the framework or the whole system of government. So it's just an early government. So they're saying this is why the governor it has the power that he has here. Okay, I'm going to skip the rest of this paragraph. I'm going to allow you to look at it. Here you can see I've underlined a section here that shows that Pearl accompanies Hester, and then the way Pearl looks is interesting, and this is actually a good question here. So as you read this, see if you can figure out how Hester has dressed Pearl. What does it resemble? And then even more than that, is there a symbol here? Symbol, sorry, my handwriting there. All right, so that's what I want you to try and figure out in that paragraph. All right, and then if you couldn't figure out what the symbol was from this paragraph up here of the way Pearl is dressed, then this paragraph right here should make it more clear. So let me write that in for you. Hold on. So there you go. So the question here in the brackets is, what does Pearl's attire symbolize, what she's dressed in? Okay, so you can figure that out. Maybe you figure it out up here, and then you can confirm it here. Okay. It's once again not hard. I think you can figure it out. I do want to apologize for the sounds of my children in the background. I'm doing this at home, so that's just part of the ambiance you guys get in the background. Moving on with this story. As the two wayfarers, that's obviously Hester and Pearl, came within the precincts of town, the children of the Puritans looked up from their play, or what passed for play, from those somber little urchins, and spake gravely with one another. Remember, the children are terrible. So I'm actually, I'm just going to put a little sad face on the side here, because I have a feeling that these children are going to be terrible. Behold, verily, there is a woman of the Scarlet Letter, and in truth, moreover, there is a likeness of the Scarlet Letter running along beside her side. So if you didn't figure it up here, he repeats it again, right? So Pearl, the way she's dressed, is a symbol of the Scarlet Letter. Come, therefore, and let us fling mud at them. There it is. See? I knew they were going to do something terrible. But Pearl, who was a dauntless child, dauntless, if you look up dauntless, it means fearless, right? After frowning, stamping her foot, and shaking a little hand in a variety of threatening gestures, suddenly made a rush at the knot of her enemies. Knot would be the sinner, right? And put them all to flight. She resembled, in her fierce pursuit of them, an infant pestilence. Pestilence is like a contagious disease. The scarlet fever, or some half-fledged angel of judgment. Nice. Whose mission was to punish the sins of the rising generation. She screamed and shouted too, with terrific volume of sound, which doubtless caused the hearts of the fugitives to quake within them. The victory accomplished, Pearl returned quietly to her mother and looked up smiling to her face. So Pearl here is, and if you read chapter 6 successfully, this shouldn't surprise you. So I'll put it here in the margins. So you can see here, Pearl scares off child attackers. Without further adventure, they reached the dwelling of Governor Bellingham. This was a large wooden house built in a fashion of which there were specimens still extant. Extant means existing in the streets of our older towns, now moss-grown, crumbling to decay. Okay, this is a house that is still present when the writer is writing it. And melancholy, sad, or gloomy at heart, with the many sorrowful or joyful occurrences remembered or forgotten that have happened or passed away within their dusky chambers. This is just a little, he's doing a little side note. These homes are still around. Then, however, there was a freshness of the passing year in its exterior, so it's new, and the cheerfulness gleaming forth from the sunny windows of human habitation into which death had never entered. So nobody had died in this home. It had indeed a very cheery aspect, the walls being overspread with a kind of stucco, in which, in which fragments of broken glass were plentifully intermixed. Ooh, nice. So that when the sunshine fell, slantwise across the edifice, it glittered and sparkles of diamonds had been flung across it by the double handful. So, I mean, really, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful house. Beautiful new house. The brilliancy might have benefited Aladdin's palace rather than the mansion of an old Puritan ruler. So it's not a very Puritan house. Beautiful and not very Puritan. It was further decorated with strange and seeming cabalistic, as far as I can recall, means mysterious, okay? Figures and diagrams suitable to the quaint taste of the age had been drawn in the stucco when newly laid on, and now had grown hard and durable for the admiration of after times. All right, so it's beautiful. It's got this mysterious. It's not very Puritan. All right. Here we go. Pearl, looking at this bright wonder of a house, began to caper and dance, and imperatively required that the whole breadth of sunshine should be stripped off its front and given her to play with. So she's like, Mom, take that all off. I want to go play with it. All right, moving on. No, my little Pearl, said her mother, thou must gather thine own sunshine. I have none to give thee. As they approached the door, which was of an arched form and flanked on each side by a narrow tower and projection of the edifice, remember that means the front of the building, in both of which were lattice windows with wooden shutters to close them over at need. Lifting the iron hammer that hung at the portal, Hester gave summons. She knocked, right? Which was answered by the governor's bondservants, a freeborn Englishman, but now 7-year slave. So a bondservant, as you look down here, is a person who indentured himself 7 years to a wealthy person in return for passage in the world. So in order to get there, he said, I will serve you for 7 years. During that term, he is to be the property of his master, as much a commodity of bargain and sale as an ox or a joint stool. The serf wore a blue coat, which was the customary garb of serving men at that period and long before in the old hereditary halls of England. Is the worshipful Governor Bellingham within? Inquired Hester. Yea, forsooth. So forsooth here just means to be honest. Like we said, that would be like to be honest. Okay, staring at what with wide open eyes at the Scarlet Letter, which being a newcomer in the country had never seen before. Yea, his honorable worship is within, but he has a godly minister or two with him and a leech. Remember leech? We discussed that in the last chapter, or actually. Yeah, I think it's the last, or maybe chapter 4, that is a doctor, okay? You may not see his worship now. Nevertheless, I will enter, answered Hester Preen, and the bondservant, perhaps judging from the decision of her air and glittering symbol on her bosom, that she was a great lady of the land, offered no opposition. So, in irony, you can see the question here that the text has. What does the bondservant think about Scarlet Letter means? He thinks that she's some lady of importance. Okay? So, what's going to happen here is Hester is going to enter. Okay, so for the rest of this chapter, we're just going through the house. And there's some interesting parts that are important, but not incredibly... They're interesting, but they're not incredibly important to the story. So what I want you to do for the rest of this chapter is go through this section, okay, all the way through, and find some interesting things that you can share in class. So, like I said, there's some stuff going on, but it's basically they're looking at pseudo armor, and there's some interesting things, but it's not incredibly important to the story. But these are things that you could share in class. So go through here, find a few things that you think you could share in class, maybe some symbols, if you can think of something, or just some amusing things that we can talk about in class. All right. Let's go ahead and jump into this next chapter, the elf child and the minister. Okay, well, first of all, this is an interesting, because obviously the elf child, okay, This is most likely referring to Pearl. And the minister, well, we're not sure who this refers to yet. So let's see what we can find out. So Governor Bellingham, in a loose gown and easy cap, such as an elderly gentlemen love to endue to give themselves with in their domestic privacy, walked foremost. Okay, so he's the first one coming. Remember, if you read the end of it, end of that chapter 7, you know that there's a group of people coming, and Pearl is getting super excited because she sees some people. And he appeared to be showing off his estate, showing his grounds, and expatiating. He's talking about, on his projected improvements. Hey, I'm going to do this here, I'm going to do this here. The wide circumference of an Albert ruff beneath his gray beard and the antiquated fashion of a King James reign caused his head to look not a little bit like John the Baptist in a charger. I'm not quite sure what that means. John the Baptist in a charger? That's weird. Okay, I Googled it, and this is kind of what it is. John the Baptist was famously beheaded. So King James had these like ruffled feathers around like this like collar, and then you had the head, right? This once again one of Mr. Troop's terrible drawings. Okay, but you had this big like ruffles, and so it looks like he looks like his head is on a plate because famously John the Baptist was beheaded at the request, I believe, of the niece of Herod, and she asked for his head on a plate. So that's what that means. The impression made by his aspect, so rigid and severe and frostbitten with more than autumnal age, he's getting old, was hardly in keeping with appliances of worldly enjoyment, wherein he had evidently done his utmost to surround himself. Once again, note here that this is once again not Puritan. There are lots of luxuries. What is Hawthorne trying to tell us here? Sorry, I don't have words right now. But it is an error to suppose that our great forefathers, although accustomed to speak and think of human existence as a state merely of trial and warfare, and thoroughly, unpretentiously prepared to sacrifice goods and life at the behest of duty, made it a matter of consequence to reject such means of comfort, even luxury, as lay fairly within their grasp. Okay, so this is an interesting question here. The Puritans may say that they don't like luxury, but many of them really do. So what is Hawthorne trying to say? Well, there is definitely some hypocrisy going on in this. Moving on, this creed was never taught, for instance, by the venerable pastor John Wilson, whose beard, as white as a snowdrift, was seen over Governor Bellingham's shoulder, while its wearer suggested that pears and peaches might be naturalized, blah, 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 blah. They're just going to talk here, okay? So there's going to be some discussion. What I'm interested in is further down. Behind the governor and Mr. Wilson came two other guests. One, Dimmesdale, which most of us know is the actual father of Pearl, whom the reader may remember having taken a brief and reluctant part in the scene of Prester Prince's disgrace, and in close companionship with him, old Roger Chillingsworth, a person of a great skill in physic, for 2 or 3 years past, had been settled in the town. So note here, what do we call this again? There's some T, right? This is weird. You literally have the actual father, okay, and then Hester's old husband, which, by the way, both of these, nobody knows, right? Except Hester. And Hester knows both, but Chillingsworth doesn't know that Dimmesdale's the actual father, and Dimmesdale doesn't know that Chillingsworth is the Hester's old husband. Okay, so we're setting up a scene here. Okay, and we're supposed to read into this scene. Okay. It is understood that this learned man was the physician as well as a friend of the young minister. Okay, so these two, once again, Dimmesdale and Chillingsworth, have made friends whose health had been seriously suffered of late by his too unreserved self-sacrifice to the labors and duty of pastoral revelation. So what is this question actually here illuminates it for us, or shows us, okay? What has happened to Dimmesdale, right? Well, he's in poor health because he's been working too much, right? To what might this occurrence be attributed? So yeah, he's working, but why might he be working too much? And once again, I don't think it's too hard for us to imagine why he might be working too much. So write down your thoughts on that. So the rest of the chapter I'm going to leave to you. I've set it up. They've appeared. And remember, always keep in mind the title of the chapters, right? The elf child and the minister. So that tells us that there is something important in the interactions between the elf child and the minister. We already know the elf child is most likely Pearl. Okay, so there's going to be interactions here, and I want you to read the rest of this chapter, and I want you to look at the interactions that are going on. And then I want you to make some inferences. I want you to take some ideas and figure out what Hawthorne is trying to show us through this discussion, okay? You're going to get some interesting ideas from it, okay? So when we discuss it in class, okay, you can definitely have some opinions. Once again, I will share this PDF with you, and these questions on the side here, okay, are going to give you clues as to what to look for. So do that. Once again, like I said in the other video, if you would like to use this PDF instead of your book, print it out and bring it to school, I don't mind. It's actually a little bit easier to follow along with, and there's more room in the margins for you to write. Okay? So that's kind of where we're going. There's a little bit more reading here, but if you look for the interaction between Pearl, okay, and the other people especially, okay, you're looking at the interactions here. You're going to get some things, you're going to be able to talk about some things in class that Hawthorne wants us to discuss. All right, and that's what I want you to come with, and let me know what you think, and we'll talk about that in class. All right? Okay, well, that's it for now. I'll talk to you later. Bye.